Sorry, I'm going to have to flip in between from my laptop. Yeah, because I don't have an automated. So I'm here to really tell, I find a great story. It's about, unfortunately, we closed down, but as we closed down, we almost, it was like a brotherhood for us. Even today, I was talking to someone that worked in there with us and said it was the best job I ever had. We're really fun, and it was amazing to see the transformation. So, as I was doing this talk or similar last November for our DevOps TO meetup, and it was like as I reflected on where we were and where we landed, it was kind of really, really amazing. It was really, truly transformational. And a little bit self-deprecating love, who I am. I've been doing essentially public-facing websites and apps for maybe 12, 15 years, really big name brands like thestar.com, Global TV, a lot in the media industry, Show Me. And I learned a lot, and I saw myself transforming as a technical architect, as a leader over these years. And I think Show Me was even more transforming because as I learned about automation, as I learned about working with other groups and Agile, and I've been through so many iterations of it, and it's really cool. I actually say this, one of my very first jobs doing this, I was as a manager. I remember after a few years, going to people that used to work for me and say, hey, man, I'm very sorry. I really was a terrible manager. And you start learning from your things. So who was Show Me? At peak, Show Me was about 125 people. We were often known as Rogers. Oh, you belong to Rogers. Reality, that wasn't the case. We're owned by Rogers and Shaw on an equal partnership. We independent and function fully independent. We were a company, at peak we had about 125 people, and half of it or so were technical, developers, the whole thing. And you'll see through the story I tell how we converted and transformed from being born from a corporate, usually corporate environment into this startup, nimble, and having lots of fun with it, and the team's learning a lot. To this day, we still have a Slack group for what we named ourselves Show Me's, and we still share jobs and share stories, and every now and then, people come, hey, how are you guys doing? How was your weekend? So it's really again, it was an amazing story of being a Show Me. I'm going to tell you a few stories as I go through this, and some that are not here, just to remember. But to give you perspective to the success of Show Me, I'm going to share some numbers with you first. Our usually month traffic, we were serving 4 petabytes, our video origin. Our largest S3 bucket on AWS had something like 1.4 billion objects. I know this because I had to delete all this data at the end. It was a lot of work and a lot of timeout requests. Often we would serve something like 4 billion requests. At the peak on Akamai, we were doing something 250 gigabits per second. It is really large engineering problem to deal with. Some of the stuff we used to do or you would do for different solutions, it wouldn't work. 200,000 API requests a second at peak. So it was really an interesting engineering problem. I have a question for you guys. Maybe some of you heard me ask this question. I don't know, the king of me cannot resist. Do you guys, anyone knows how much storage can a human brain hold? Anyone? I'll give you the answer. It's just amazing. It actually, the experts say you can store about 2.5 petabytes. So it's like a million, 2.5 million. This is how many brains we delivered a month often, 8 to 10 brains. So again, it's just the sheer volume of what we did with this startup. So like a lot of my talk is about how we transform. And a huge part of how we transform was really related to empowerment. So I wanted to really show you what's the definition of empowerment. So it's to give power or authority to authorize, especially by legal or official means, and to enable or permit. That's really, really important. We converted and were successful because of this empower that we did to the people. It wasn't about a tops down. It was about we doing the right thing for the company from all levels. So, and I'm doing this because it will show as we progress through doing things, how we transform from a people and from a technical perspective. It kind of reinforces the earlier presentation because it's very hard to transform at this level if you don't have executive buy-in. And that was the key thing to me that happened at Show Me. We had huge executive buy-in from all executives to make. So, like, I'm going to tell you a little bit of where we were and what we did as we migrated from physical to AWS. Just to give you perspective, we were essentially started as a Rogers department. You know, we invested something like $7 million on this physical infrastructure that essentially at the very first month of operation, during our beta, we consumed 60% of it. That means immediately we had to do something. Like, it was a nightmare. We had all sorts of different issues. For example, even our routing, it was so much traffic that even clients on Bell were having issues, clients on this ISP, we had to be contacting to get different routing for the video files. It was just really a ginormous. So we kind of went through 3 phases. Very first one, we had to migrate all our video traffic out, our video files into S3, CloudFront, Akamai combination. At the second phase, we shift and left everything as was. It was easier, it was fast. I'll tell you how fast it was when I get to it. It was like amazing. And then as third phase, we started re-architecting everything into microservices, using concepts like event-driven architecture, lambdas, streaming, kinesis, test-driven development. So that was when we actually start seeing the quality increase. So phase one. Phase one, again, I said we consume 60% of our internet pipeline. To upgrade it, that would be another $2 million, because as soon as you start talking about combining multiple fiber links, it's really complex routing gear. So we move our video origin to AWS. We increase scale and address network capability issues. Really, what we were looking for and why we picked AWS was large, unlimited capacity. We needed to just store 1.4 million objects. Like, it's crazy. It's a huge amount of content that get uploaded more and more every week. We used a combination of S3, CloudFront as our video origin, and Akamai as the delivery network. That was also evolving. Eventually, in the plans, we're doing multi-CDNs. We use CloudFront to chunk. I don't know if you guys know a lot about video, but there's so many video formats, and CloudFront help us chunk the content for smooth stream. So like Xbox needed that. So phase two. Phase two has a nice, interesting story to it. So as we started moving to AWS, we hired a vendor, Trinibus, to help us create a disaster recovery in our very first iteration of automation. So we had this thing that we thought it worked. So as we started growing and growing and growing at a level, I go to my peers and my general manager and say, hey guys, you know, it's October. I really don't think we're going to resist the traffic in December. the traffic in December can scale up to 100, 200 times more. So I think we need to migrate before December. I think we can do it in a month or two. So I get buy-in, so we decided to shift the data center. So I remember having the meeting with the team, the whole infrastructure DevOps team, and I say, hey guys, we're going to migrate to all our traffic in production to AWS. And it's like, whoa, everyone's like scared. And they're like, okay, by when? Oh, by December. It's like, that's in 2 months. Are you crazy? No, don't worry, guys. Do this. We can do this. We already have a disaster recovery set up. So what we did, that's a story where I said, okay, let's set 2 teams. The business essentially had agreed to stop the business for us. They essentially said, hey, you have a month. Do whatever. We are not going to give you any work. So we essentially set up on sprints and agile and blocked. We literally put we had these posters of our actors and said, no one can come into this area. And they went on. We agreed what is primary, and every week, that's all we focused. We didn't focus that we had to launch in 2 months. We focused what we had to do that week, that sprint. And the advantage was like multi-data center by default, fully automated, no auto-scaling at that point yet. So phase 3, we moved. We were successful. We started in October, took us 4 weeks to do everything, and it took us actually 2 weeks to do everything, and then about 4 weeks to actually test and fix any issues, bugs we found. So put it in perspective, that was like 700 servers that we had to move. So it's a lot of stuff we had to do in there. So we essentially, at phase 3, we're 100% hosted on AWS, all environments. This essentially sold out our data center. We sold out the gear, gave it away, and we started moving towards just-in-time compute with microservices architecture. There was, for example, a component of our architecture that was really key to us. Every video player would send us a beacon every 30 seconds, and that was massive. And always failed, and always people lost the point where they were on the video. So this had to be highly reliable, but highly ability to scale. So that was one of our projects that we tackled, where we essentially moved from a SQL Server database to Couchbase and streaming, Kinesis, Lambdas. It was a totally decoupled auto-scaling architecture. It was kind of nice. Tested, we could, using JMeter to test through the entire cycle we knew was working. And how we did it, we used like infrastructure as code, using Terraform and Chef, using developer best practices, pull requests, and the whole that jazz. Everything had a version. Even our infrastructure components had a version. The other side we did is we had this massive infrastructure to prepare videos to be watched. We had many devices, so just-in-time video workflows. Believe it or not, we had about, 19,000 videos. And we had to reprocess them on the fly quite a few times, because either we found bugs, or we had this, funny story, we submitted the Apple TV app to the store, and they said, oh, we approve it, but we found a bug with your video files, so if you can fix it in 24 hours, you can go live. Well, 19,000 assets, you have to fix it. So there it goes. I go to one of my video team and says, hey guys, can you do this? So, and I go to the vendor in the cloud, said, hey guys, just like take our limits out and we'll like go through it. And yeah, we did it in like 6 hours. We just scaled with the cloud. So it's an amazing story how the cloud helps you scale to whatever business problems. And we're also doing data warehousing in the cloud, BI and the whole thing. But I mentioned this a bit. What was the before picture? Essentially, Show.me was a department at Rogers, part of a major corporate culture. So we're really non-agile, non-DevOps, no collaboration between product development, engineering, operations, and reality-facing. Ops was getting the last word at the last minute. Hey, deploy this. Oh, and there's this new server you need. The teams are very traditional. You have a 24/7 NOC, video operations, DBAs, application admins separate from your typical infrastructure person team. There's no really best practice, none. No unit testing, no peer reviews, no architecture guidelines, no code guidelines. It was beautiful. Yes. Infrastructure is fully manual. It was like baking a nice thing for months. No docs, you didn't know. Nothing about it. It's a true monolithical stack. Large portions of it actually copied from our previous Rogers enterprise. Means we inherited by default all this technical debt, like before we even went live. Not much monitoring. The monitoring was amazing. They had this, I started 3 months before we went live, and the monitor was this application that was used by nuclear power plants, believe it or not. And only one guy had access to it. So you couldn't really alert, you couldn't do nothing. It was quite interesting. So the after picture. And it's funny because Shomi was in business for about 2 years. And there was literally, you could literally divide almost exactly by what year 1 and year 2 in the before and after picture. So we started following business priorities as setting quarterly goals. And this is one of the key things about executive buy-in. It took, before all teams would say, you guys want us to do too much. And it's changing every day, every week. Priorities change, everything changes. Like, there's no focus. So management had to get disciplined. We had to go, and everyone in the senior executive team would propose a project. We would not vote. So just because you propose, I would propose something, let's say I'm going to do automation with Terraform, doesn't mean it would get done. I would actually have to convince my peers in market, content, et cetera, to do it. So it was an interesting proposition. But once we came out of that process, that is what we did. No changing, unless the business was on fire or something like that. But we tried really hard not to disrupt sprints. We also had full agile teams for development and operations. Like most teams were running scrums, like DevOps was running what I call it Scrumban. It's essentially Kanban with some practices from Scrum. Like, for example, the planning meeting, the retrospectives, we found to be very useful. And partly because of our learning when we did the migration to AWS, the teams were very focused on that process. Even though operations, sometimes you get a lot of requests almost every day. So we found a mix, a process that works for us. We created really an integrated DevOps team. It included all the skills required, DevOps, DBAs, monitoring, SREs. Anything that dealt with production was in that team. And everyone was equal. Everyone was cross-trained. So that's really, really important. No, oh, there's the network guy, the DBA. Everyone needs to know something about it. There's always the experts, but it's how you learn from each other. And we, as I said, we did infrastructure as code as our model. It was actually sad and amazing to see when we first announced we're going to shut down, and we didn't need the dev environment. We shut down our dev environment by doing Terraform destroy. Like, we just wiped out the Terraform file, and voila, 1 hour, about, I don't know, 50 to 100 servers were gone. Another key learning that even through my previous things, if you work for a company that has a lot of vendors, just outsources a lot. Outsourcing is okay, but I think I found a long time ago that outsourcing relies on you for them to be successful. You cannot throw away the best practices. You need to do code reviews. We invited vendors to Slack channels. We would create a Slack channel, and we would call something like shared dash try Nimbus, for example, and we would invite the people, and they could only ask us. So we had immediate communication with these vendors. We could ask questions back and forth. The other big thing we did was we got away from this custom tool we had built for Monitor, and we revamped our entire Monitor. We knew what was happening ahead of everyone. If we didn't know, we would continue to invest resources on knowing. Datadog, New Relic, Sumo Logic, PagerDuty, all those tools in our toolkit for monitoring. And the thing that was the most amazing is one of our tenants was, you can see on the wall there, have fun. And you see those things as we would have team meetings and people would give examples how we were having fun. So it was on the walls around so people would remember. And and most important, have a Roberto in the house. We had this SRE in our team that cooked for us. We'd sometimes cook steak during work. It was really fun. It was amazing. Lesson number 1 for me. I've been saying these lessons. I'm just going to repeat. Senior leadership needs to agree on a prioritized backlog list. They need to use the tell me what you really want concept. Really, really want. It's prioritized. That means I'm going to deliver number 1, even if there's 40 things in order. I may not give you 40. I'm going to try, but give me a prioritized backlog. They need to agree to it, or this is not going to work. Have fun. There are too many pressures in many deadlines. It should be a conscious effort. Like cook food in the office, be creative. Have a Roberto in your office. He's a great cook. Nerf gun wars, weekly game days. Like that's you as management have to do these things to create a culture in your teams. It makes the teams gel closer. During times of crisis, you want teams that work together well. And those things create that. Lesson number 2, we should have invested in tooling from the get-go, CI, CD, before we launched. We had no tooling, almost. So implement proper tooling is harder. If you're doing it after you're live, you're in trouble. It was a lot harder. I would say a good practice is to create a team that is not gating to any project, to work on your tooling. That team, all it does is create tooling for other teams to use. Deployment, whatever it is that you need it. They're creating best practices and educating. Give them time. Again, I mentioned this before, external vendors. External vendors are not I don't know the right word, this big thing that is going to resolve your issues. They're helping you. They're only going to be successful if you help them. So they need to be supervised by internal staff. If you don't have internal staff to supervise them, that's going to be a problem because you may be asking for a building that is 30-story tall. You're going to get a 15-story tall building with no washrooms on it. So code reviews, best practices are important. Show me a lot of our NPS scores were terrible because we just outsourced everything. All our gaming, mobile apps went to a vendor that did whatever they felt like it. We weren't doing anything to make sure it was good. 5 minutes? Okay. I guess I have to rush a little. High traffic on, if you have something like Show Me, and not a lot of people have, high traffic causes really bad things. So, we had a time where we crashed for about 4 hours. And it turns out was this microservice that had essentially a wrong calculation of a date. So it's really important to do things like automated testing, integration testing. Don't forget best practice. It's hard, and I won't be, it's hard to balance the needs of the business and the needs of automation, because starting automation slows down. So you need, again, executive buy-in. Key tools. Pick a CI tool. In my view, pick a CI tool that allows you to instrument, initialize pipelines via an API or via some YAML file directly on your code repo. It just makes it a lot easier to run, for example, if you're doing microservices. Something like Jenkins 2, Circle CI. There are many others doing the same concept. It's probably a good idea if you have integrations with container, because eventually you're going to get there. HashiCorp Stack helps. Terraform for your infrastructure as code. If you're using multiple clouds, it's really helpful because it's one module and you're reusing the same code. Pick a good APM tool, something like New Relic or Dynatrace or whatever fills your needs. Log aggregation tool. We use Sumo Logic. There are tons of them. Pick one. You need to know what's going on your infrastructure. And probably you need something for your infrastructure thing. Like for configuration manager, there's a lot of arguments. Chef, Ansible, this, a Puppet. Pick what your team is comfortable with. It's really, they all have their strengths and weaknesses. This is what our customers saw if we were failing. So we dreaded this. And that's my talk. Thank you. Do you guys have any questions? Thank you.